Hello everyone, today we're looking at Exalted Jupiter in Cancer, a recent addition by Sphere and Sundry. Just going to scroll down and take a look at some of the offerings, some of the materia that Sphere and Sundry are offering in this Jupiter in Cancer, Exalted Jupiter series. Some beautiful, beautiful looking stuff here. All right, let's take a look. Exalted Jupiter, the Sublime Dynamo. After climbing the hill and turning into our actual driveway late into the night, post this Jupiter in Cancer working, my headlights illuminated the absolutely gigantic whole house generator that must have been dropped off earlier in the day, since there was no way I missed that thing on my way out. Bonus points for it being underneath a Jupiter-ruled oak. This picture doesn't do its mass justice, just like phones don't capture good pictures of the moon, but this was the first nod towards what this series' subtitle would become, the Sublime Dynamo. Dynamo literally meaning generator. Long-time listeners of the Astrology podcast forecast episodes will know Austin's been talking about getting a generator for years now, probably since COVID, but it took Jupiter going into Cancer to finally get going, and it's taken months of plans being laid. Major steps throughout the process have synced with Jupiter in Cancer workings, and it fired up for the first time the day the series went into active pre-launch production, by total happenstance, or magical synchronicity rather. The hum of that full Aries D2 moon in the 10th house of this election applying to Jupiter on the ascendant is just so felt, so present, so energizing. This is not a before-bed Jupiter. But at the same time, Jupiter exalted in Cancer, even a particularly active one, is no Mars or Sun. It has its own completely wholesome, balanced way of moving through the world, a very Tai Chi way. Never rushed or going at any fever pitch, not irritable, nor overly concerned with the opinions and activities of others. It just keeps moving forward, each well-considered step sustainably, consistently in front of the other, like some divine child of both tortoise and hare, who unstoppably, inevitably wins the race. Many Jupiter in Cancer natives are the same. Warren Buffett, one of the most popular and well-respected money men, usually in the top 10 richest worldwide, gets almost none of the shit other billionaires do. Famously reserved as an investor, only invests in what he understands, has never invested in tech, ruled by Mercury. His best and favorite investment is the super Cancerian Seas Candy, which my aunt just brought us 2 boxes of last week. Judge Judy Scheindlin, an actual judge who society relies on to provide judicious wisdom, who was also the best paid person on television for years, earning a reported $94 million for her final season after 25 years on air. Afterwards, she sold the rights to her own catalogue, which she personally retained the rights to, for $100 million. Taylor Swift, who is the music industry, and the first musician to reportedly become a billionaire from music alone via 1, 2, 3 punch of the all-encompassing Eras tool, which celebrated the entire span of her almost 20-year career at that time, which enabled her to buy her own master recordings, worth an estimated $360 million, after re-recording and re-releasing a major portion of her past work to erode the value of the originals, masterfully strong-arming its equity back to herself. She's also one of the few pop singers and musicians who has written the vast majority of her own catalogue. James Cameron, who directed 3 of the highest-grossing films of all time, starting with Titanic, the story of the biggest, most luxurious, Jupiter equals gigantism and grandeur, ship, which sails the ocean, which Cancer rules, ever built, until Avatar, a story about good-spirited, wise, gigantic blue people, overtook that record 12 years later. Jupiter has a 12-year cycle. And finally, Avatar, the Way of Water. The way equals Tai Chi, Cancer equals water sign. Cameron is also a deep-sea explorer who holds the world record for reaching the deepest level of the Mariana Trench in 2012. Closer to home, Robert Hand, another Jupiter in Cancer native, is one of the most widely beloved and well-known male astrologers of the Pluto in Leo generation, and one of the three patriarchs of Project Hindsight, which spearheaded the translation of texts that led to the resurrection of Hellenistic astrology. His Planets In books are regarded as astrological classics, which have likely sold hundreds of thousands, perhaps even millions, of copies all told. Another grassroots fan favorite of the astrological sphere, who is already known as one of the great practitioners of the millennial generation, no doubt destined for living legendhood deeper into her career, is Diana Rose Harper, who specializes in care and relationship as core tenets of her approach. And yet another Jupiter in Cancer the gentle reader may know is, drumroll, electional architect Kaitlin Coppock, who actually qualifies as a Jupiter Mahapurush in Jyotish alongside both Hand and Harper, meaning great person of Jupiter for possessing Jupiter in rulership or exaltation occupying an angular house. This series, if it were an individual, would have the exact same Hamsa Yoga Austin and Robert do with an exalted Jupiter upon the ascendant. Beta testing Sublime Dynamo has helped me understand, not just conceptually, but in that very special way talismanic materia gives you a pass to live temporarily as a placement, experiencing the world as one of its natives does. Putting into perspective qualities I've observed Austin exhibit for almost 2 decades. Pardon me while I publicly glaze him in the name of astromagical science. For one, Austin is famously, you probably don't need me to tell you, an excellent teacher and supremely actually gracious, especially in person. Second, his ability to care for and nurture himself and those in his charge, including our tiny pneumonia-struck shelter kitten Bear, whom he made steam tents for in our first months together, an early glimpse into what an excellent father he would someday become. In ways both large and small are practically boundless. Each morning starts with almost an hour of Qigong and Tai Chi, which makes his energy all fluffy and sheep-like, and he has always prioritized physical activity for health, stretching, mobilization, taking his supplements, yet he's no teetotaler, perfectly capable of enjoying a great time deep into the night. Less so now than in the 20s and 30s, of course. Sayonara, Neptune in Pisces, you were too fun. He decoded the notoriously fraught Ouroboros Press translation of the Picatrix and has syncretized from the ground up, without any third-party non-Jyotish teacher, a modern, yet traditional astrology encompassing magic and remediation, which he now shares with hundreds of students via the Fundamentals of Astrology program each and every year. He dutifully performs one sadhana after the other, devoutly reciting mala after mala of mantras on a daily basis. He must have over 1 million under his belt by now. Austin also prioritizes his loved ones and students above any other call. Why do you think 36 Faces has taken so long? And literally, the only way you can get a consultation with the man over the last 10 years is because you know him, and you need one. And he won't even take money for them at this point. He has built a career mostly out of podcast appearances and hundreds of openly accessible horoscope columns over the last 3 decades, choosing to provide free guidance and education over any format that requires payment at basically every self-determined opportunity. Yet the world provides well for him without any focus on marketing for its own sake. He's virtuous, gregarious, and genuinely well-intended. I can't remember him speaking ill of anyone for any reason, and I don't think I've ever actually met a more deeply devoted family man. I'll stop gushing, but I must have cashed out about 100,000 karmas to bear his children of both star and flesh. Point being, these are all exceptional qualities Jupiter in Cancer helps impart. One this series can aid anyone to embody. And because this series is Jupiter, Moon, and Ascendant, is actually much higher grade than any natal configuration typically is. Most charts are not technically qualifying talismanic elections. Austin was not born in the hour of Jupiter, for instance. Its results will actually be purer and finer than almost any personified example could ever illustrate. It's popular nowadays to be wary of Jupiter for its excesses, which is partly where the value of exaltation comes in. Rulerships exacerbate the most extreme qualities of any planet or luminary, whereas exaltations bring out the best in them. They waste less and conserve more. They make fewer mistakes and create less fallout. Cancer is a slow-moving and sensitive yin sign with many needs for safety, security, and nourishment, for emotional and physical care. And these are things Jupiter is more than happy to look after and provide for, and things society benefits from occupying him with. This is a true family man of service to his community, Jupiter, versus the more famous Jupiter as power-tripping womanizer archetype. Now, many people in the astrological community have joked and memed about the fact that since Jupiter went into Cancer, the world hasn't gotten a whole lot better or more awesome. I personally live, laugh, love to joke around, but truth is, perspective is, transits don't happen in a vacuum. They occur in the greater context of everything else going on. Jupiter has been too occupied making things less horrible to create boatloads of excess good, which in Cancer it needs time to do anyway. Jupiter has been mired down in on-again, off-again aspects to relationships with malefics, his energy channeled into problem-solving and stabilizing, which in Cancer he excels at. Side note that I genuinely worry for when Jupiter leaves Cancer, what flaw might fall out. The point is that finding talismanic and remedial-grade elections for Jupiter's exaltation this 12-year cycle has been difficult. In fact, we've only found 2 elections considered worthy enough so far, and despite really wanting more, may not even get them, which means that they have been few slices of time, in our estimation, less than an hour each, where Jupiter has been strongly pronounced and unafflicted enough to take the wheel since entering the crab's domain. But those rare moments, fleeting as sand through an hourglass, were harvested and preserved for safekeeping by the astromagical seed bank that is Sphere and Sundry, available as a resource to the community and its clients, and your clients, for years to come. Ideal for an influence so slow-growing and immaculate, sublime even, as the greater benefic in its one and only sign of absolute exaltation, which, like a single grain of sand within the darkest recess of an unassuming oyster, receives coating after coating of thin nacre secreted from its mantle, growing over months and years to form a beautiful pearl. A lunar forge which uses long spans of uninterrupted time and nutrients to grow something living or precious, versus the extreme heat and fast beating used to create stuff which cuts and bears heavy burden. In other words, functionally, a womb forge. The Mars-Jupiter relationship, especially in regards to creation, is emphasized in this election, with Mars playing a key supporting role as the full moon's ruler from the 5th house of creativity and children in its own rulership of Scorpio. It is also, while not given power to steer the election's outcomes in any way, remember Jupiter is rising and it's Jupiter's hour, and the prayer petitions of ritual were conducted to propitiate Jupiter, a powerful engine, as the chart's final dispositor. This is an element of what makes this series so energizing, gently relentless and productive, compared to any old off-the-shelf Jupiter in Cancer, and strongly distinguishes it from the other in the can, which likely won't be released for a year or more. So it's not worth depriving yourself to wait for You'll use them for different stuff, promise. These features are going to make it excellent for creative endeavors and literal procreation, if that's what you seek, as well as career, reputation, and personal self-directed becoming by nature of the houses most supported. But we did ensure breathing room. It's mitigated by Jupiter getting to call the shots as its ruler. And in the decan and bound of Mars, further delivering reins to the chart's final dispositor. I believe part of how it shows up in the energy of the election, placed in the 9th, is the emphasis on worldview and spirituality to overcome the negativity of our times, and how vital but challenging that can sometimes be. And as the nativities mentioned earlier illustrate, Jupiter in Cancer has a lot to do with owning its own assets and generating equity over time. It grows, not because it does so quickly, but because there are no leaks in the bucket. Its method compounds like the magic of interest. Jupiter in Cancer runs a tight, stable ship that keeps progressing slowly and in the right direction, and therefore is prone to few losses. It's fortunate, but a large portion of its fortuitousness is derived from not being haphazard or careless. It cares tremendously about what matters. A number of years ago, it was all the rage to talk about, forgive the language, but giving no fucks. I considered writing a piece about the superior position being the proper allocation of fucks, rather than the absence of them, but never quite got around to it. Come to find, it has been a rather Jupiterian sentiment, not one I've mastered personally. So Jupiter in Cancer brings wisdom to the matter of its growth strategy. It doesn't take on more than it can chew, faster than it can metabolize what it takes in. It provides for others and is provided for in turn, and often quite handsomely. Now, note how many of Jupiter in Cancer natives aforementioned have been especially successful and dominant in their own fields. Commitment to a singular progressive course that delivers value to those it serves leads to mastery and consolidation, which almost inevitably confers outlier-level rewards. Rewards which come in the form of wealth, accolades, and honors for lifetime achievements. Jupiter rules both religiosity, which often necessitates or at least benefits from austerity and humble living, and also great wealth and phenomenal grandeur. How are these things under the same planetary roof, especially given the corrupting influence material excess brings? Touched on in the Antares write-up? For one, beautiful and luxurious things reflect the glory of the gods, especially the ones who like them. Beautiful things, sounds, smells, and shapes are rarer, and therefore more precious than ugly and neutral forms of the very same, which makes them coveted by those with senses, because they're pleasing. They vibrate on a level that matches the spheres they ally with. Propitiating gods and spirits involves, but is not reduced to, the act of ingratiation. We praise, we beg, and we plead. We humble and prostrate. We claim ancestry, and we give gifts, offerings which have the effect of courting favor. Gods and planets as gods are extreme archetypal examples of excellence. They share the same qualities humankind does and aspires to. Except they're better, which is how and why they can help us become better. Venus is the most beautiful. The moon is the best nurturer. The sun is the shiniest and most central, and therefore the best at gathering attention and directing. Mercury is the most adaptive. Mars is the hardest working. Saturn is the longest suffering. And Jupiter is, myth after myth, king of it, and them all. Kings get all the things. Not every rhyme is a fact, but that one is. Temples are erected in styles that pay tribute to the gods they honor and filled with the things that please them. This, potentiated by prayer, religious observance, and ritual, is how those spaces magnetize and maintain the energies, attention, and affections of the gods and spirits they serve, which draws their grace and bestows their blessings. altars are, miniaturized versions of the same. What do you give the man who has everything, Jupiter? More and finer versions of what he already has, because to give him nothing is to be overlooked and forgotten by him. The king coming to visit was a great honor upon your house, historically speaking, but it might also bankrupt it if you weren't careful, since the instinct was to go as all out as you possibly could to impress him, to get closer to him, to make yourself like him. Kings and queens throughout history have had access to the finest priests, magicians, astrologers, and counsel the entirety of their domain had to offer, and the wisest surrounded themselves with the best of them, like they did everything else, not simply the ones who flattered and enabled them. The story of Alexander and Diogenes comes to mind. Yet wiser and rarer still is the two-in-one, the sage king or sage queen, who is the fullest, truest embodiment of Jupiter on earth and myth. The one who amasses power and influence due to their good grace, wisdom, and knowledge, whose throne is built upon it. Jupiter is not only the highest, most judicious sovereign, but the teacher, guru, holy one, hierophant, and sage. Beyond, and more meaningful than the realm of rote materiality, is that of divine truth and spiritual substance. The greatest wealth of all is derived from having a deeply true understanding of the world, the universe, and its ways, which necessitates and delivers peace, clarity, and buoyancy of spirit. It's an outlook which encompasses and allows for all to exist and thrive, without want or need for suffering. It's compassionate and all-forgiving, all-encompassing and magnanimous. To one's teacher and to the great guru Jupiter, the greatest gift that can possibly be given is liberation from the shackles of ignorance which previously bound you. To offer oneself, having amassed and assimilated the knowledge they strived to impart. To be devoted to your subject and your lineage, and to become a living, breathing testament to the value of its teachings. To serve as a beacon of light, a torch-bearer, which guides others to the threshold of their own transmutations. Apples are for Venus. Since the gods possess every virtue, and one of Jupiter's is generosity, it is his role to give back. In Cancer, which is associated with the people, especially the vulnerable, typically women and children, the sick and the hungry, Jupiter, the genuine concept of noblesse oblige. The responsibility of the privileged and powerful to act with generosity and nobility towards all others, but especially those hierarchically beneath them. The idea being that high status is not simply an entitlement to be enjoyed, but a duty to look after those subject to your gravitational pull, influence, and orbit, to offer protection and resources as needed, to serve those who serve you. But in order to give, one must first amass, which is why or how Jupiter draws money and possessions. Historically speaking, there were two institutions society was expected to finance. One, the sovereign, now the government, because it provided judicial systems, laws, and defended the homeland. And two, the church, which provided for priests who cared for and cultivated local communities. Such taxes and donations were intended to ensure material and spiritual resources would be available for distribution as needed. Note that genuine Jupiterian energies prevent spoliation and corruption, just as Deneb Al-Gedi improves the behavior of police. That is how Jupiter commingles kingship, the finer things, and religion simultaneously on the institutional social plane. On the personal level, Jupiter is also optimism and hope, and the chance that any day, at any point, things can get better. It is the beauty of the open source, Holy Spirit, and the benevolence of the gods. It is the prayer tearfully uttered with no finery but desperation, answered in full for naught but his grace. It is that Thema Mundi, sixth Jupiter Day feeling, which I felt again for the first time since, after having anointed myself with exalted Jupiter oil and hearing this song in the car on my way to the airport to pick up the aunt who brought the seas. This is Bastille by Hans Zimmer from Pompeii 2023. Highly recommend listening to 2/3 this video, plus reading or listening to the lyrics before proceeding, especially if you've not heard this version. Maybe put it on and take a bathroom break or refresh your beverage. This write-up is a marathon, not a sprint. Tears began streaming as I felt waves of the optimism, beauty, and hope Jupiter best bestows, rising and falling alongside its orchestral swells. Stopped at a red light, mundane as day. I got home and looked up the lyrics and their meaning, only to discover that the song was written as a conversation between two corpses that had been buried at Pompeii by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, which made the sabbatic witch in me cackle aloud. What are we anyway but dead already in a dream quest for meaning? Our flesh crying out, how am I going to be optimist about this as death and decay become us? The perfect allegory for the times in which so many are being buried alive under the weight of ceaselessly spewed darkness, drowning in senseless despair and suffering. The walls, as we know them, crumbling down in real time. And yet, right here is the answer in the transcendent movement of orchestral swells, in the stained glass and halos that gold casts when the right light hits it just so, in the rays relentlessly defined by the billowing melt of sacred frankincense, in the incandescent glow of warm candlelight, and the sacred prayer-filled silence which concludes each hymn pregnant with all potential. Jupiter's exaltation is most high at the exact point of Thema Mundi's rising at 15 degrees Cancer. It is the key to a life worth living, worth enjoying, how creation justifies its very self. Remember, the abundance which corrupts, that worldly institutions are infested with foul play, is to be expected. The answer, the key, the antidote is more high-quality Jupiter and Deneb Algedi circulating within it. The abundance deserved, appreciated, and generously shared is that of Jupiter, especially Jupiter in Cancer, the most noblesse obliged of all. Another misconception about Jupiter, born of modern interpretive techniques versus predictive experience, compounded by people just not being super great at astrology, thinking transits happen in a vacuum, that Jupiter by itself can supersede every other ill the sky has to offer, is that it's not as good as it's cracked up to be. Wrong. Jupiter, astrologically, is the answer to making anything and everything better, with Venus beauteous second. It improves all it touches. That being said, Jupiter in your chart might not be the most impactful thing to improve your own natal karma. These things coexist without contradiction. They can orient towards different use cases, which illustrate the importance of being able to apply talismanic materia in multiple ways, one of which is passive application, the other of which is actual magic. Now, generally speaking, most people would be able to apply Jupiter and most remedial-grade spheres to their bodies and experience improvement, good results. But there will be some who are allergic to any input, such as some are who are allergic to any input, just as some are allergic to gluten, and still others who aren't technically celiac, but feel better without it. Modern American wheat, blah, blah, blah. Point being, it takes trial and error to learn whether we simply aren't good at running a particular current yet, and we'll get better over time with the right troubleshooting and conditioning methods, always worth trying, or simply do not like how an influence feels as personal preference, or truly suffer from exposure to it, the exceedingly rare allergic scenario. If a power is a natal key for you, applying it passively, basically as often as you can tolerate, typically only helps. If a planet or luminary is contraindicated on the natal level, it can still be worked with magically, because magic works on the universal, the Jupiterian level, not the personal, natal one. You can still do Jupiter workings for prosperity, wisdom and learning, candle spells, honey jars, sigil activations, etc. There are also periods of time when working with a particular sphere is more beneficial than others in a Time Lord or transiting capacity. All that being said, most people are going to love how this feels, so long as they don't use it before bed, and even then they might need a downer come nightfall. I kid you not, I've barely slept this launch cycle, but I've felt quite good and haven't even applied it each day. One hopes this has been an informative sermon, but let's go to the nitty-gritty, shall we? This series, since we're already dropping F-bombs, fucks. It feels like that song from earlier, yes, the one about talking corpses, which is perfect because we can't actually change the metaphorical volcano erupting in our vicinity. We can only figure out how to be optimistic and make the best of things. That requires feeling good enough to stay proactive, gaining and maintaining perspective, and staying in touch with what matters, which Jupiter in Cancer is better at than anything. We, as people, need to stay operational so that we can help those who need it, including ourselves, I promise you. And I'll never stop preaching that truly good people need access to more resources to provide gainful security for actual humans in a world where the robots are coming for everything. And as human rights disasters and genocides rage worldwide, we must turn to our gods and our magic, first to empower ourselves, and then to provide shelter and aid for those we are able. Exalted Jupiter is good for almost everything. Seriously, where to even start? Wisdom and spirituality, wealth and material gain, long-term success, achievement, emotional, mental, and spiritual stability, moral virtue and ethical progression, expanded perspective and a more forgiving, encompassing worldview, grace and dignity, supportive relationships, happier and healthier family life, marriage and children should you desire them, better access to teachers, gurus and traditions, as well as becoming a better, wiser, more patient teacher and student, writing and publishing, eloquence, a sense that all will be and actually is in many ways already well, gratitude, living a longer, richer, happier, and generally more fulfilled life. The list never ends. Like Asclepius, everyone should use it. Now, some electional characterization and heads-up disclaimers. First, this can have a gentle onset, or it can feel like a wave of nervous system regulation, practically knocking you over, a muscle melt. Deep breathing, give me a moment type vibe. It depends on the form, your sensitivity, and myriad other factors. It can take time to gain a sense of. Exalted Jupiter is a gentle, radiant force, not an arrow piercing the sky. For that, see Jupiter in Sagittarius, which is another write-up worth reading in the waning parts of the year, and another series filled with holiday scent profiles. Second, just because you have energy does not make it all entirely productive. This power can keep you humming way beyond anyone's capacity to remain good at stuff. Jupiter is and can do a lot, but our teeny tiny delicate human vessels are not equipped to run that charge for long periods of time before we trip a breaker. I passed this threshold many times in the beta testing phase. This natural limit is somewhat similar to the second decan of Capricorn, and at some point the mind can't run what the body itself can either. Doing Jupiter brain is a workout in and of itself. Secondly, Jupiter in Cancer isn't just interested in work. It also cares about family and spiritual matters and meditation and reflection and nurturing. So remember that when your productive energies peters out, that there are other aspects of life which benefit from your presence and attention, and pivot to those. Staying dynamic is helpful. We have many workhorses in the catalogue: Mars in Capricorn, second decan of Capricorn, Jow, Mars-Jupiter, Antares, Golden Titan, even Mercury in Virgo and Gemini can get a lot done. And while this will help productivity, it's not truly its primary function. Jupiter in Cancer's strength is having the bandwidth to attend to all the things that matter, a little bit each day, not grinding ourselves into the ground for capitalism or perfection's sake. And for that reason, it's better to use a little often than a lot rarely. It is possible to overdose in my experience. You can still fry yourself a bit with it. Exalted Jupiter also helps with small but meaningful improvements over time. For instance, what if you cut the bottom 10% of your worst habits and increase the good by 10% simultaneously? Your life would feel and look totally different within 30 days, let alone 30 years. It has an overall wonderfully tempering and moderating quality, especially compared to Jupiter in rulerships. The sleep warnings are also very real. You really should plan for engaging in magical and/or mundane downer, because generators be generating. The full Aries moon in this chart does not help. Asclepius, Venus in Taurus or Pisces, the moon in Taurus, probably not Cancer, but you can try and report back to the client community, and even Saturn in Aquarius and Capricorn can all be helpful influences to slow things down when the time comes. If you want a nighty-night Jupiter, see Butter Ocean. Use will also enhance the significations Jupiter is tied to in your own natal chart, where Jupiter is, and the houses, planets, and lots it rules, including whatever it aspects, in addition to the ones best supported by the election directly. As far as houses go, the 1st, 10th, and 5th, with a side of 9th, and Cancer itself, can't forget that. The Sublime Dynamo will layer well with just about anything, but I cannot stress enough combining it with Thema Mundi because of the resonance between Jupiter's exaltation degree and the birth chart of creation's ascendant. The working itself was a fire ceremony where the bust of Butter Zeus, cast during Thema Mundi's cloister, featured in the photos for Butter Ocean, was offered on the pyre along the one with the ether candles that were too excitable to actually rehome, which dripped through the base over time, creating a pool of blue wax beneath the setup. Also offered were royal purple lotus flowers, 24-karat gold, and lamb's ear torches, harvested in the hour of Jupiter, dressed with beeswax, prepared in advance, unlike the ones on offer, which were crafted during the election. Royal Hojari frankincense, some of the world's finest local blue cheese, and herbs and spices consecrated during the operation. The smoke, mixed with the intoxicating, warming scent of piping hot mulled wine and rich, caramelizing butter, billowed upwards into the night sky to embrace the full Aries moon, delivering the spirit of our offerings to Jupiter rising in the east. On the same election, per their locations, core collaborators Tony Mack and Elizabeth Barriel worked their magic, for which I'm exceedingly grateful. And last but not least, our resident Mahapurush carved stones, as Austin has for most Sphere and Sundry elections for years, which he will begin offering to the public in the year of our Lord Jupiter, obviously, 2026, which would technically be circa 4603 million or whatever. In all seriousness, thank you for reading this and for supporting our little astromagical atelier in the mission to help as many human spirits as we possibly can to live healthier, happier, better, and yes, richer lives, and to grant greater access to genuinely life-changing spiritual, magical, and the astrological technologies. Finally, thank you to Austin for being many, many things to me, our family and our community, but especially my teacher. In other Jupiter-related updates, the sphere related to publishing, before needing to pivot to preparing this release, I had gotten deeply immersed in the process of writing book again. It is my dearest hope to be finished and or published around 5 months' time. If you would like to be notified and cast a vote for which editions most interest you, please fill in the form below so I know what formats to focus on and can gain a sense of how many to order. Even writing this prompted me to start working on it again, which required a self-intervention. Launch, Kaitlin, launch. It's been a sync with this series 100%, which is promising for anyone else looking to publish. I was tempted to make an Exalted Jupiter in Cancer playlist, but it turns out Bastille and its lead singer Dan Smith, Cancer Sun, Jupiter in Pisces, Wild Sinistry, with this election, already made one for us. Enjoy. Shipping for this began Wednesday, December 10th. We anticipate this launch will take around 3 weeks to fully process. Thank you for your patience. Looking beautiful.